Kara and Dan, welcome to the Game Informer Show, guys.
Hey,
Hi.
thank you.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you. You guys are in New York, right?
Yes, that
New
we
York-
are.
New York State. Though.
Yes.
Not,
Upstate.
not the cool New York, the New York State.
I
Naturally.
don't know about that. Upstate's pretty cool too.
If we mean temperature, maybe.
So I was
No,
looking,
it's pretty neat over here.
yeah, I was looking you guys up a little bit. It looks like, Dan, you've been there at Vicarious Visions for 1,000 years, and Kara, are you relatively new?
We're like both ends of the spectrum. I'm way younger than I look, and Dan's way older than he is.
Yeah, I have a baby face. No, I've been there for 19 years at this point.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I started here when
When you were 2.
when I was 2. No, 1997. So 19 years, and yeah, there was like 5 people here when I
Oh my
started.
God. We actually just interviewed the founders of Vicarious Visions a little while ago on the Game Informer show. So got the full rundown of the studio.
Yep. Well, I don't have to repeat it then.
Yeah, but you have worked on Crash games before, right?
Yes, I have. I want to say around 2002, 2003, I was the creative lead on Crash Nitro Kart, which was, the sequel to Crash Team Racing for Vivendi Universal. And then the studio's also made a number of handheld Crash Bandicoot versions as well.
Yeah.
And then more recently, we've done the Crash Adventure Pack for Skylanders Imaginators.
So you guys,
So that was kind of
yeah,
a bit of a blast from the past, yeah.
you are now the Crash Bandicoot-ish studio, right? You're the go-tos.
So, yeah,
How does that feel?
feels great. It's kind of like a homecoming or a reunion for me with Crash. I like Crash a lot. It was fun.
And I mean, as the new person too, he's easy to fall in love with. Holy cow! Like I'm like attached now. It's a great franchise. The character's adorable. He's like got that right. He's a little bit like a punk. He's a little bit of a badass, and so I think everybody you're taken back to being kind of a belligerent. Well, I am a little bit of a belligerent teenager, and even back to a little bit to the 90s. And so yeah, it's fantastic to be working on him, and like I said, you get attached to it's a great game. It's a great character. I mean, there's a lot to love there.
Yeah.
You were a belligerent teenager.
Yes, we'll get my mom on the line, and she will wholeheartedly agree. I definitely was.
Used to wear some bright blue pants all the time and spin around constantly.
Yeah.
Cool. Pretty cool stuff. So you just want to walk me through the process of this remake occurring? When did you first hear about it? What was the first vision? How does this whole thing come to be?
I love that, Dan can walk through some of the more practical things, but I think it really did come from the fans. And when I think Sony, Activision, ourselves, obviously, they heard this love of this franchise and especially these games, and like bring them back, especially as it became closer to the 20th anniversary. There was more and more more and more fans in the forums and videos and so on saying, hey, we love this, bring it back, please bring us back. So they were heard, and it's like, let's do this. And again, because it's timely because of the 20th anniversary. So, I mean, that's really what inspired this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we kicked things off around the 20th anniversary with the Crash Action Pack. It's a mouthful, for Skylanders Imaginators, and we got that done. And Sony and Activision approached us and said, "Hey, do you want to do a remaster of the original games?" And we didn't have to think long about it.
We danced around the studio going,
Yeah.
yes.
It's pretty awesome, awesome responsibility, because I mean, you think about it, these are games that have really kind of defined a lot of people's childhoods. Growing up, with their PlayStation 1s being their first video game console. I mean, I'm personally a little old for that, but still, it was really something where we just thought about it a bit. We're like, wow, we have a chance to really kind of bring this to new audience and still, recapture those glory days for a lot of the other folks.
So why was it pitched to you as a remake or remaster? Was there ever making a new game on the table?
That is not something that folks approach us about.
Yeah.
Who knows? But right now it was approached as a remaster where they really wanted to take the 3 original games that a lot of folks fell in love with and bring them back.
Yeah, it's strange timing. It seems like Crash fans have been in a bit of a drought for a while, and now suddenly it's Crash and Skylanders for what you guys made, the remake, and then also just bizarre timing with that Uncharted 4 Easter egg relatively early on in that game. Why do you think there's so much Crash now? Is it just, did Sony and Activision figure out some rights issues, or why the deluge now?
I think, like I said before, I think it's largely it's the 20th anniversary. I think that was a large amount. That's a bit of inspiration. I think just a little bit of luck and things just falling together at the right times, and teams being available, and that's more or less how it happened. Nothing more nefarious than that, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think also too, it's just one of these things where it almost seems in culture these things kind of come in cycles. It's like almost like this peak nostalgia moment, where everyone's clamoring to kind of, be able to play it again, and not just a Crash game, but the originals. So, enough times passed where people are like, yeah, it'd be awesome to go back and do this.
Yeah, so there's nice synergy. I mean, like Dan mentioned with Crash being in the Skylanders Imaginators, and he appears in one or two episodes of their TV show, The Academy. That's really neat too, because that starts to allow a new generation. So obviously that's for a younger audience, those games in that TV show. But what that allows those guys to do is start to grow up with knowing Crash, and then being able to get a hold of these games and being introduced to them just like people were 20 years ago. So there's a really nice synergy there with getting those fans that were enjoying the games 20, 15 years ago, but then getting a new audience that could love them just the same.
And some of those old fans might have kids now too that they can share it with.
Exactly.
Of course, yeah. So Dan, you learn about the project. It's pitched as the remake remaster. What's step one of remaking these games? How do you form the team? What's the vision?
Right. So certainly our first step is figuring out what the team is. I mean, having the team is the most important thing, because with the right team, I mean, if the vision is, good, great. If the vision is wrong, then the right team can course correct, right? So really, a lot of what we did was really look for, the Crash fans in the studio. We've got a lot of Crash fans. And then, taking a step beyond that, really looking at, like artists and audio guys who really wanted to work in that cartoon style. And, just really finding the people that were going to deliver on this. And really wasn't hard. I mean, there's a lot of them in the studio. And once we got that team together, it was really, the next step was really just immersing ourselves in Crash. Because, for me personally, as an example, I mean, I hadn't really played them in a good 15 years at this point. So you really got to kind of acquaint yourself with the games again. And there's a lot to learn. They are just jam-packed full of all sorts of stuff, be it gameplay to Easter eggs to whatever. So
when you're playing it, are you capturing the gameplay then? Or are you taking a bunch of notes? What's it like when the game director of the remake plays that original trilogy?
For me, yeah, I mean, it's taking a lot of notes. It's starting to really not just dig into what the games were, but dig into what inspired the games in the first place. Try and put yourself in the minds of Naughty Dog and the folks who created the games in the first place, and start looking at their inspirations. Because, certainly when you're taking something that was of a PlayStation 1 generation, just copying it, polygon for polygon isn't going to get the results. You've got to deliver on kind of what the feel of the game was, what the spirit of the game was, what people remember the game to be. And so to do that, we started digging even past Crash into what inspired, your Jason Rubins and your Andy Gavins. And so we started, going back to Animaniacs, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Looney Tunes, things like that, to really kind of get a sense of the tone of what they were originally trying to capture, and then start using that to kind of inform the decisions we're making as well.
Does that just mean animation style, or what are the details within that change?
I think a lot of it, animation style certainly can inform that type of thing, but I think a lot of it just comes down to tone. and really tone and humor, and trying to capture the zaniness and the charm. I think, modern animation certainly has changed a lot in those 20 years. It's dominated a lot more by, CG heavy productions, be it your Pixar's, your DreamWorks, your Blue Sky on the high end in the movies. And the television shows too are copying that to some extent. So really, a lot of that animation that I was referencing just now harkens back to more of a classic style of animation, and it just has a slightly different sense of humor. And so we wanted to make sure the team really kind of understood that, because it is a bit different than some of the stuff we've done in the past. But sorry.
No, that's great. I mean, really, pre-production for the whole team was largely was just really getting a hold of any kind of documentation. I mean, these games are also one of the neat things about these games is they are actually very well documented. For the past 20 years, you can find interviews, you can find articles. There's a white paper on what the Japanese version had in it versus there's like a lot of information. There's tons and tons of gameplay videos, and those have been really, really valuable sources of information for us. There's a lot of little details, a lot of edge cases, a lot of if this then that with the crates and collectibles and so on. And having that information out there has been really, really valuable. So the whole team in their discipline took the time to actually learn as much as they can. And yeah, we literally recreated design documents so that we could make these. So yeah, that was pre-production for us. And the team really knew they had, we had to really get this right. And all those details, we had to find them, we had to uncover them, make sure they're right or better them. What other nice thing about being able to have this sort of this retrospective look at the original games is going, okay, what did we see the original development team learn across the 3 games?
Yeah.
And where did they say, oh, we're going to improve? Like, well, that's something that, you could see it in the first game, and by the second game, they improved it. So it's like, well, we can now have the benefit of hindsight and say, yep, that was something they obviously improved. So we're going to bring that across all 3 games.
Do you have examples? I know Andy Gavin has written about just how the controls in Crash 1 are a little bit stiffer, a little more rigid. Is that a good example, just making things a little more fluid? Are there other examples of things that you've kind of spread out across all 3 now?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Controls are definitely key among that. Another thing that was critical, if you remember Crash 1, its save game system was very thin.
Yeah.
So we've gone in and basically said, all right, we're unifying the save game system for all 3 games, and we're even adding some modern options to it. So it's not only manual saving at a station, we've also added auto saving for more modern players. And your more hardcore players don't have to use the auto saves, but they're there for folks who need them and just don't think to save on a regular basis. We've also gone back to the checkpointing system and really tried to make sure that all the checkpoints are behaving in a consistent manner. I think one of the reasons getting 100% in Crash 1 was a lot more difficult was because the checkpoints didn't save your crate progress through a level, so you basically had to complete a level without dying in order to get your 100%, your clear gem at the end of the level. So and they went and changed that for Crash 2, so we went back and unified that. But even beyond that too, then you start thinking about, okay, well, they were a little more generous with their checkpoints in some of the later games, so we go back to the earlier games and start looking at, okay, what's the best place to put some of these checkpoints? And so I think it is a lot of these really subtle touches to, try and make sure that, it's not something unless you're, a really diehard fan, you're going to notice, but I think it's just going to help the overall feeling of cohesion and also, just make the earlier games easier to pick up and play.
I am curious, just if you can get technical, I would love it, but just explaining, if you were just to make a 100% faithful remake with controls-wise, everything just spot on exactly like Crash 1, let's just say, for example, what would feel different? Like, does updating the visuals change the way the game feels on its own? What falls behind with the gameplay if you do that? Like, what are those tweaks you have to make to the way Crash moves?
Right. So if it were just a strict visual upgrade, it would feel a little bit different. And that's because, animation and VFX and sound effects all play a subtle part in how something feels. That said, I mean, if you were to measure it, frame by frame against, the original game, it would come out, strictly looking the same. But it would feel a little bit different just with a strict visual upgrade. In terms of how it would play, I imagine it still would feel, as Andy was describing, a little bit stiffer. But more importantly, I think, it without a lot of these subtle tweaks we're talking about, the game would feel just a lot more difficult and potentially frustrating. And I think the last thing we'd want to do, either for our fans or any new fans, is have them pick up and play the first game and say, "Oh wow, this is so hard, I shouldn't play the rest of it." Because then why did we make it in the first place? We want people to be able to play this game and get into it and start loving Crash the way that other folks have.
I would assume this is in the Skylanders engine. Is that right?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, right on.
It's a full physics-based engine.
Yep. We are basically using the engine that was last used for Skylanders Imaginators, so it has all the visual upgrades and technical upgrades that Skylanders has allowed us to add to that engine over the years. And so one of the things that we really like about using this engine is that it's really mature. It allows us to build and test really quickly, but it also, the last Skylanders I worked on, as an example, was superchargers, and we just built this great cloud technology, and we're able just to drop that right into Crash, and now we've got these awesome-looking clouds in certain levels. So, I mean, it gives us a lot of advantages.
Water tech, lighting tech, there's been a lot of things that we've been, able to use from the engine and the work, like Dan said, stuff that's been worked on over the years. So it really allows a lot of creative freedom for the team just to be able to go, we've got that now. Let's move on.
Does that mean inherently that it's going to look a little bit like Skylanders? Like, how different did the art team try and push things? Were you trying to make it a little more abstract?
We definitely wanted to push it in a direction that was more Crash-like. We didn't want it to feel like Skylanders. Skylanders is like this heroic fantasy of bringing toys to life. And while that's cartoonish, I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier. That's not the tone we're shooting for. We're shooting for something that's a little more zany, has a different style of humor. But beyond that, in terms of art style, it's a little grittier too. And so we wanted to make sure that that grit and detail was passed along into what you see now. So yeah, the art team had to recalibrate the direction a little bit. And that took a little bit of time because a lot of them are, Skylanders veterans on this engine. So, but that's just one of those things, through pre-production we worked on and continually doing passes on Crash and on the levels until it felt like we were in the right spot in terms of what the new art style should be.
And frankly, it's actually something where we have been sensitive to because we might be known as the Skylanders studio or so on. And because people have come off of Skylanders titles, it's like, we definitely want to make this not as, something, we might definitely want to make this something different and something that feels like Crash. Another fun thing about Crash versus Skylanders is this, Skylanders is a kids title with the associated ESRB ratings, and this isn't so much. So we have a little bit more freedom to have some fun in places we might not have been able to with Skylanders as well. So exactly like Dan said, we've really worked hard to try not to, to differentiate it and make it look like Crash.
Well, just to really geek out, because I'd imagine you guys are Crash Bandicoot experts at this point. Is that fair to say? You know that trilogy pretty well?
Yeah.
A little bit.
I'd like to think so.
Okay. So when you went back...
You can ask a hard question and just prove us exactly wrong.
Yeah.
The in one level and does this, and I'll be like...
don't worry. It's not trivia per se. But I'm just curious, when you went back to study it and play it before, venturing into the remake here, Was there anything that you appreciated, anything new that you saw in the series where you're like, I never appreciated this detail, this aspect of the original trilogy's gameplay?
Absolutely.
Every day, almost. Like seriously, like there's like so many details. It's really sweet.
We're still discovering things now, honestly. It's and again, as Kara was saying, it's great to have the internet as a resource where we're able to, really pour over. I mean, the fans have spent 20 years dissecting this game, so there's a lot of stuff out there. But still, I'm trying to think of a good example at this point of something we've just discovered. Well,
Mike Berman, our tech designer, was just telling me about. I think he was explaining to me he's worked on the crate stacking rules and system. Since he started the project, and I think he's on the 5th iteration now, and they're still discovering cases where it doesn't quite work the way they expected, or it's like, and the logic all makes sense once you start reverse engineering it, but it's like it's a very iterative process with the testers. So he'll make the change, the testers will find a level where that rule set doesn't apply, throw it back, and then it's like, oh, now we see what where it's going.
Well, how
For
much?
me personally, though, sorry.
Oh yeah, how much are you guys communicating with Naughty Dog? I mean, do you have the original code from Naughty Dog?
No.
We do not have the original code.
I don't think they have the original.
They may, but what was most important for us to get was actually the original level data. And so what we did was reached out to Sony, and Sony was able to get that for us from Naughty Dog to us. We don't interact with Naughty Dog on a regular basis. We've got a few Naughty Dog veterans on the team in the studio, which is cool. So they have some knowledge that they're able to carry on.
Did they work on the Crash trilogy or later?
What's
Later.
that? Later.
Yeah. Okay.
But generally, it's been mostly us kind of either learning from what the internet has put out there, or Naughty Dog had done a lot of GDC talks and things like that about particular systems they were proud of, and I'm old enough to remember going to those GDC talks, and I actually had my old notes on a particular system for managing difficulty, and I had to dig them up in a box in my basement somewhere, dust them off, and there was a whole bunch of notes about how to implement a difficulty system. So that was pretty cool.
So when you said level data from Sony, what does that mean? If it's not the code, what is that data actually?
So it's just the original level polygons, basically. And so what we do is we bring that into our engine, and then we start using that, one, to build out the art. So the art is all built to be exactly the same size as the original art. But then that serves as kind of a guideline for the rest of the game. When you're making a game when you're making an original title, you often start building out the handling first. And you say, okay, well, the jump is going to go about this far, and this feels right and cool. And then you start building the levels to those metrics that you've built based on your kind of early handling testing. We're kind of doing things in an opposite direction, where we have the original level data, and it's really important for us to have that so the game we know will feel right. But then we've got to build the handling toward that, so that when we've got a jump distance, for example, when we're tuning jump, we're like, well, we know that jump's got to work with this particular jump distance in this particular crate puzzle. And so we have a lot of guidelines that we can then build toward. If we didn't have that, I think it would be a lot more challenging to be able to build something that feels right. It would just always feel a little bit off, and people would be like, I don't know, it's close, but it's not the same. We really wanted to get past that hump and get it as close as possible to what the original felt like.
I use the analogy of like getting a blueprints to a house or something. Like you're getting that's kind of what we got. So the placement, the scale, but from there it's like anything goes. You can whatever materials you want, you can embellish where you want, but it does give us the blueprints for how to build these levels.
I'd imagine, when you learn that you're making this remake, this remaster, however you want to phrase it, It's like, okay, this seems doable. And then you look at Crash 3 and realize, my God, this game is nothing but variety. Every level is just bizarre new mechanics. You're flying, you're on the Great Wall of China, you're sideways swimming. Is that as much of a hassle to deal with as I'd imagine it would be?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's I wouldn't call it a hassle. It is challenging, certainly. Thankfully, we have some experience in that. If you look back to Skylanders Superchargers, we kind of did the same thing with Skylanders.
Interesting.
So we actually have some good starting points for some of those vehicle modes, as an example. But I think also looking back to the original 3 games, each game's built on the next one. So when you looked at Crash 1, they actually had a riding mode on the Hog, which is very similar to Purah in Crash 3. But Purah evolved from Polar, who evolved from the Hog. So, I mean, we were able to basically look at the Hog, build out the Hog, evolve it to Polar, then evolve it to Purah. And so we're kind of following in the same footsteps that Naughty Dog did. And we're able to, take the lessons we learned from the first one to the second one to the third one. Likewise, in, Crash 2, they had a hoverboard, they had a jetpack. They were actually starting to push the variety in Crash 2 already. So again, that kind of sets the stage for Crash 3. So it isn't so much like a huge shock to the system. And also kind of knowing up front that we had to build all that in advance instead of kind of as they did, where it's like, all right, well, I guess we're adding motorcycles and biplanes and jet skis now. We kind of knew up front that we needed to do that. And we were able to, look back at the old stuff in our engine and say, okay, what can we use from our engine that, make our lives easier when it comes time to implement the biplane and the jet ski.
You mentioned jetpack. I just replayed Crash 2 last year, and big takeaway was like, my God, these jetpack controls suck. It's so much worse than I remember. Are you guys changing the way the jetpack controls?
We are certainly making sure that it doesn't feel so different that people are like, what's going on?
Right.
Because isn't it like triangle to go up, X to go down, something bizarre like that?
Yes.
Okay.
But we're also offering basically, additional use of the shoulder buttons now to be able to maneuver. And also making sure players have the option to easily, change the, invert the Y-axis, things like that. Overall, we basically look at the controls of any of these, alternate modes and say, okay, obviously we want to pay homage to, what they were originally, but, for modern players, do they have different expectations for how vehicle controls should play?
Yeah.
And so, we'll make some adjustments here and there for those alternate modes. But when it comes to Crash, we wanted to make sure it was as one-to-one as possible because you really can't mess with those controls. Those are really, really, really good.
Yeah.
So,
what about, do you guys have a favorite of the trilogy? What do you think is the strongest Crash game?
Well, you can go first.
I think it kind of changes from moment to moment. I mean,
nope, sorry, Kara, you got to choose.
Because as we're in development, you're playing the heck out of one, then you're playing the heck out of the other one. And by the way, we're all using this, just to sort of dial back for a second, we're all using the shorthand. Crash 1 is obviously Crash Bandicoot, 2 is Cortex Strikes Back, 3 is Warped. I noticed all 3 of us were sort of resorted to and that's what we got. The shorthand we use internally here is 1, 2, and 3. Anyways, 2 is fun. I'm having a lot of fun playing 2.
Yeah.
What's your favorite?
My favorite's 3. That was the one that I really started getting into it. I didn't actually play the first one. The second one I played a little bit. The third one I played a lot and then went back. I'm really having a lot of fun with 2 as well. And but to this point, I guess just given how we've been developing, I played a 1 so much at this point. So I mean, it's really hard to say, but 3, looking back, was my favorite. Certainly.
I don't know.
I think they just nailed their formula, and it felt pretty.
What's your favorite?
Gosh, 1 was always my favorite growing up, but as an adult, as a sophisticated gamer, you have to give it to 2. And actually, I had Jason Rubin on the podcast last year, I think, maybe maybe 2015, and he was saying that he thinks 2 is the peak Crash. Not to put down Nitro Kart or anything, but that's what Ruben saw it as 2 is kind of the peak of their abilities. I'm curious. I don't know how far you guys are in development exactly, and if you've started to work on every level so far, but has there been one specific level that stood out as being especially challenging to modernize?
That's a great question. We are still in development, so there still might be some that we discover that are even more challenging than ones we've had so far. I think it's just there's been some that have raised questions philosophically, like Dan talked about this whole difficulty question. So there's some that when we started playing it back, and people outside the team started playing it, it's like, wow, this is a really difficult level, and that raises that some of those philosophical questions, like what do you do about that? And so those are challenging to modernize in terms of the philosophical questions that raises.
Yeah.
Crash is known for its philosophical questions.
Yeah, I think technically, our technology is there, and we're able to modernize any of them technically. It just comes down to, when it comes down to these really difficult decisions about, okay, we've got something that plays as it did, are there any ways we want to enhance it to make it easier to pick up and play for new players? And that's tricky. That's not something we've entirely answered yet. So, like we said, we're still in development trying to figure that out right now.
Would you?
In each of the level designers might answer that question differently as well. I know I remember talking to one of them a little bit ago, and she was mentioning one of the boulder levels and just getting the speed of that boulder. It was like a bit confounding her. She's like, it's not math. And then it was just like it was clear that there had been some hand tweaking that went into it. And so again, we're doing a lot of this reverse engineering. So to get that to feel right, and to get the states and everything, like I said, feeling correctly, sometimes it's kind of looking back at how it played in the originals, and then looking at ours, and then just playing ours for what it is. So I mean, we've solved these problems or these challenges as they come up, but there's probably been moments where it's been a little bit confounding. It's like, how do they do this? And and that's fun, and that's the challenge for these guys. It's not just a mere recreating what they're seeing. It's like trying to understand how these things were made.
I'd imagine it gives you a whole new level of appreciation for Andy Gavin, Jason Rubin, and the coders in the early days of Naughty Dog. Just for, like you say, it's saying it's not math. Like there's so many things that are hand tailored in a really complex way.
Yep.
Yeah, and the amount of details. There's obviously a lot of love and passion that went into that project, and we're very much inspired by that. And that's, I think, Dan talked about this sort of the team we chose and brought together basically through a bunch of overachievers and very experienced, passionate people, and that would bring that same care to their craft. All the different ways you can die, for instance. That's one of my favorite aspects of the game. It's like, that's not cheap. From a production point of view, having, what's it, 100?
It's around 100.
That many different ways, and it's all the VFX and sounds and animations, and then you have to re-rig something. And some of those are, costly little moments, and yet there's like, yes, we're doing every single one of those, if not a couple more.
You're adding some more, is that right?
Hey, what?
You're gonna add some more?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. We'll see.
Oh
we'll
man,
see.
That's like adding a new chapter to the Bible. That's dangerous territory, guys.
Yeah, exactly. But like I said, like that level of care and detail is something that's very inspiring. And like I said, it seems obvious that there was a lot of passion, and they were having a lot of fun, probably, I imagine, when they were making those games. So we want to bring the same.
Yeah, very important to us that the team is having fun while they're making this, because this is the type of game where that sense of fun will show right through in the final product.
And we are allowing them the creative freedom to embellish and enhance and add wherever they see fit. Every single moment when they're remaking one of those animations. So it's like, wouldn't it be funny if we add a little bit of this? And you've seen it, in the work we showed at the at PSX. And fans totally picked up on this. It's like the result when you finish a level and you see the result screen. Yeah. We've added a couple little animations depending on how many crates is hitting Crash's head. And so those are the little things like, hey, if you guys if you have time and the ability to do that, go do it. And as long as it doesn't markedly change the game. Everyone knows what Crash is now. Add that stuff and have fun with it. And so we do believe the team's having fun too.
Yeah. And that's why it was really important to make sure that the team understood, again, the tone and the humor that we were going for. I mean, not only for the Crash 1 level results did we add additional animations. The designer who was coding it was like, well, what if we just, let you drop the crates faster? And so you can just hold down the button and it becomes a steady stream and you flatten them faster. And it's the same joke, but it's really punched up. And, one of my favorite moments, was just quietly observing folks at PSX playing and seeing those things that we put in for a laugh, getting a laugh,
Oh, nice.
So we did the job right, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I'd imagine there's situations where you're looking at like enemy design specifically. I'm thinking of like especially the more mechanical levels towards the end of Crash 1 and Crash 2, where the enemy designs are just bizarre. Are there those moments where it's like, I don't know what the hell Naughty Dog thought this was, and when we have to make an HD version of it, how do we try and replicate whatever the this is?
Yeah, it's a challenge. Certainly at that point, I mean, we've kind of got to evaluate it on a couple of factors. One of them is that, it still needs to serve a gameplay function. And so we want to make sure, as best as we can, that it's communicating what its gameplay function should be. And I think in Crash 1, some of them didn't communicate as well. So that's an area where, we need to continue working and revising the enemies. But then also it comes back to the team fun and making sure that, okay, we're not entirely certain what that is, but we know generally what it looks like. Let's let the artist kind of envision what a modern version of that would look like and still have a little bit of humor to it. So
Okay.
So there's a little bit of interpretation there, but as long as we've got, our inspirations right, it kind of guides us to the right point.
Are you guys making any content changes? There's some things that just feel like such a relic from the 90s, and obviously that's part of the charm with doing a remake like this. But I think even of like Crash's girlfriend in the first Crash is like, woof. It's an odd character. Is that character still intact?
Tana is still there.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Tana looks a little bit different.
Oh.
She wears a different outfit now. She actually has an outfit that kind of reflects Crash a little bit more. So she's got, her shoes and shorts, and she wears a Crash t-shirt. But also, outside of just how she looked, I mean, we didn't want to fundamentally change the character. We tried to, enhance her personality a bit more. I mean, she is as equally strong as Crash. I don't know if you've seen the intro cinematic for the remaster, but, she doesn't go down easily. She actually takes out a couple of scientists before they restrain her. So, we wanted to make her a little more feisty,
give her a bit more agency.
Yeah.
Tana was actually something we spent some time talking about before we started. It was like, I mean, like all characters, it's like, okay, what are we going to do about this? How do we modernize this? Again, it comes back to that same fundamental question. How do we stay true to the original, and yet how do we modernize it? So every single aspect of this game kind of does have that same question. So with her, and we wanted to do, take the time to give her due diligence because she was controversial. And so, yeah, we talked about it and said, well, just by virtue of making a 3D version of her that smooths out some of the curves, makes her a little bit more realistic. She has runners, like there are sneakers, and but it was more or less just giving her agency. And, a lot of that might have been just because of restrictions and technical restrictions they had back in the day. So now she can have more animations because our engine and obviously the hardware can support it. So we can, like Dan said, we can flesh out her character, and that's not just for her, for all characters get a lot more facial animation, and so the cinematics teams is having a great time really understanding what the characters' personalities are, and then, like I said, fleshing those out with more moments, and again, especially with the face, with their faces, giving them more personality and bringing those out. And we've also given her some. She literally didn't have any voice.
Yeah.
So she gets to have some sound. So again, that's just all just giving her some agency and
Sure.
making her as much of a character as anybody else in the game.
I am curious, how are you guys handling the story stuff? Are you adding more cutscenes? And also, on that same front, do you have the voice actors back? Are you just casting people that sound like Coco? Or what's the overall storytelling strategy here?
So I'll speak to the overall strategy, and you can talk about the voice actors, I guess.
Okay.
So overall, the story isn't going to change. We certainly aren't going to change something that the fans love so much. So a lot of it is about not so much the individual narrative beats, but making sure that the characters have their personalities come across more. And then, giving the characters, a few more moments to shine, I guess, in the story. Also looking at ways just to add, little gags here and there, little Easter eggs into the cutscenes and things like that. We're also taking a look at, especially in the earlier games, intros and outros for bosses and things like that to help their personalities stand out a little more too.
Yeah, those are fun.
I think that due to technical constraints at the time, especially in Crash 1, the intros and outros didn't have much heft to them. So we wanted to make sure that, each boss got his or her due.
I'm looking forward to seeing your intro to Pinstripe. Like, I don't think the character came up ever again in the Crash trilogy. It's this weird rodent with a machine gun mobster all of a sudden. How the hell do you introduce that character in a way that makes any sense whatsoever?
Well, you just have fun with it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you'll actually, he is subtly introduced in the opening cutscene, and we made sure to kind of pay homage to this as well. He's actually in one of the cages right before Crash is transformed. So they Naughty Dog was like, yeah, we got that covered. It's just really hard to pick up on. So, we're just trying to make sure that stuff comes to the forefront.
And Papu Papu was also in one of those cages subtly?
Yeah, Papu Papu was not, although, I wonder, that would be pretty funny. No.
So not necessarily adding new cutscenes, just expanding on what's there? Is that the basic idea?
Expanding on what's there and making sure that the original intent and personality really comes through.
Yeah. And then what about voice acting?
So yeah, I mean, Activision reached out to a lot of, I believe, without fail, double thinking, every single actor has been part of the Crash Bandicoot franchise in one game or another. So they all have, experience in the franchise. So we reached out to all the people we could get a hold of that had some experience, and again, it's like I'm sounding a little bit like a broken record, but it was the same sort of creative direction that we gave them, and the voice acting as the whole team has. It's like, yeah, let's make it feel like the original character. So let's look back again at how the original character sounded and played and what their personality was. But hey, now's the chance to do it again. And if you want to add a bit more, emphasis here or take it away there, this is our chance to do that and have fun with it again. So again, we let them have fun in the studio again with the less limitations with technically. We also have a lot more sounds and emotes. So whereas in the original games you might only hear one oof or one death sound or one hit sound, now there's like a whole range of them. So that's just going to flesh it out, make it feel again more modern, make it feel more fun, more immersive. So that's where we went with the voice actor.
Yeah. Did you get the Cortex actor back? Because that voice is so good.
We got Lex Lang to do Cortex.
So no, we weren't able to get Clancy back, but I believe Clancy approved him.
Give it a thumbs up.
I'm not sure. Okay, don't quote me.
Okay, right on. What about music? Is it an orchestral version of those original tracks, or what's the strategy there?
Same thing. So it's all being composed in house, and their approach. And I've talked to them about it. They listened to each of the original tracks, and and like they said, it's just sometimes it's just a matter of having contemporary sounds, more like in contemporary technology that's going to make it sound modern. But it's also having modern sensibilities about what a contemporary game should sound like. So some tracks will sound a little bit more faithful to the originals. Some places will be like, hey, I can make this a little bit more jazzier. I can add a little bit more bass. I can make it a little more funkier. So they can push it just a little bit here or there where it feels right and it suits the gameplay, it suits the level, the feeling of it, and again, we're allowing a degree of creative freedom there as well.
Yeah. Cool. Do you guys have any nebulous plans for DLC or anything, or any big changes that might be on the horizon?
Those are questions we're always being asked about, even internally. It's like, oh, can we do this? Can we do this? Do you have time to do this? TBD.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the first thing is just to get these games done, make them great. Like Dan said, we got to nail that handling, get all the levels feeling right. All these details and moments, we've got to get those in, make those fantastic. Really do the original games justice.
Yeah.
Make sure the fans are going to really, really love this.
Yeah.
So just getting that's our first priority, is making sure these remasters are amazing.
So what I can say, especially for all the fans who might be listening, is that we've heard them. We've been on the NeoGAF boards. We've been on Reddit. We've, watched all the YouTube videos that are either generally broadcast or addressed directly to us. And, we know what they're looking for. And we've got a ton of fans on the team as well, like Kara was saying, that have all these ideas too. So, we're really kind of sifting through all the ideas and things like that people want to see that weren't in the original games, and trying to make sure that, if we have the time for it, that we can deliver it.
Okay.
But since we're in development right now, we just can't really say one way or the other. We've got to really kind of, like Kara was saying, get the core game done first, and then we can look at, other big reveals afterwards.
Is there anything you're 100% ruling out, like the idea of Crash Team Racing being DLC? Is that just right out?
I mean, there's like so many other stakeholders and people and companies involved in these projects. I wouldn't ever rule anything. I would say definitely we're never going to see that. And then somebody at a head office or Sony would say, let's do this idea. And then we're doing it. So I would never, I'm new to this industry, but I'm never going to rule anything out ever again.
That's a smart way to think about it. Yeah.
Okay, right on. Well, the Crash games are some of my favorite of all time. I'm really looking forward to seeing your game. It was just surreal at PSX, seeing that trailer and seeing Papu Papu take center stage in a game trailer in the year 2016. Like, what the hell is this world coming to? It's amazing.
Yeah, it was so great. I mean, PSX was such a boost for us as well. We felt like we were on the right track. Like I said, we're all overachievers. We've been pouring our heart and souls into this. And, but then just seeing the love come back, it was just like, oh, yes, it was a little bit of a reaffirmation that we're on the right track, and just felt really good, because it is like I've said this before. It's a love letter to fans. It's a love letter to the franchise. So, getting a love letter back in the form of like videos where people are screaming and crying, was just like, oh, that means a lot to us.
Nice. Are you guys treating it all like a museum relic? Is there going to be like an archive or anything in there where people can look through original concept art? Do you see this as, I know calling it a museum piece might be a bit much, but in the vein of what they did with like the Mega Man collection recently, where they have a lot of archival stuff in there?
That's something we've talked about, but again, we can't commit to anything quite yet.
Well, that's just fine.
Figure things out.
Even if it's not in there, I'm still really looking forward to this trilogy and playing through those games again, and look forward to seeing what you guys put together over there. Thank you so much for watching this excerpt from the Game Informer Show podcast. You can click right here if you want to subscribe and listen to the audio version of the full show. Full episodes air every Thursday, and they feature Game Informer editors sitting around talking about the biggest reviews, previews. We talk about exclusive impressions of Game Informer's cover stories. We have long-form developer interviews, everything that's great in gaming. So every Thursday, be sure to check it out.